parliamentary process to assess the motion to remove Busisiwe Mkhwebane is to take place soon. An official in the Public Protector's Office in the Free State is the latest to submit an affidavit to Parliament calling for Mkhwebane's removal. To discuss the latest Public Protector issues, I'm joined by political analyst Busisiwe, who comes from the University of Johannesburg. Prof, thank you very much for your time. I asked Pulemabe, seated on that chair yesterday, why has the ANC not taken a position on whether or not Busisiwe Mkhwebane is fit for office and which way they're going to be voting once this process gets underway? 2 weeks in a row, his response is, we've not taken a decision yet. What's your assessment?
Well, I'm not sure. Perhaps if one were to speculate, obviously it could be because they are not necessarily unanimous on that point. Supra Mohammed at some point did say that some of them would not vote in favor of that motion.
And he was told to keep quiet.
He was told to keep quiet, but ultimately, though, the caucus must adopt a similar position. It must be a unanimous position by all members of the ANC. But it could be maybe they want the process to unfold for all the evidence and the arguments to be presented before prejudging the matter. That's an objective view, I guess, if one were to look for one. But the reality, of course, in the ANC is that we know some of them, pretty much like the public protector, she has been ruling in their favor. So there are certainly disagreements in there.
Meanwhile, the situation continues to deteriorate in provinces like the Free State, where the employees, their senior officials, are now saying she actually is abusing her office, but add to that she's protecting certain political figures.
In fact, that makes a strong argument for her suspension, because the Constitution does provide for her, as soon as the impeachment process starts, she can be suspended. And part of the reason for that, obviously, is to ensure that she doesn't interfere in the processes. She doesn't interfere with hiding of evidence, for instance, with operations at the OPP. And for her and the statements that she's been making, there's a certain bravado about the way she's been acting, as if she thinks that she's above the law. I mean, the latest salvo was to criticize the Zondo Commission and saying Judge Zondo is not doing a perfect job, when in fact I think the consensus out there is that he's been doing a pretty good job. So she is casting herself as a rogue of sorts and is not doing her case a favor.
Meanwhile, she invites the very same people, or some of the characters she invited to her birthday. Musebenzi Zwane, for example, is said to have been at her 50th birthday this month. The understanding is that the Secretary General of the ANC, Ace Magashule, was also invited, but he may not have attended. What is going on in her head?
I don't think she cares anymore. I think she thinks that she's been convicted pretty much. She's taking, it's a JZ psychology, that at some point you don't give a damn, so you don't care what they think. And even if, for instance, there were people who thought favorably towards you, who thought that they could argue a case in your favor, but that demeanor suggests a certain element of uncaring, that she doesn't defer to institutions. There's a character lack of sorts.
Prof, I can't not take this opportunity to ask for your opinion. COSATU, we've just spoken to them. They are saying Finance Minister Tito Mboweni must actually leave the office in Treasury if he's unhappy, simply because he says maybe there should be a referendum on Twitter, a referendum on whether or not taxpayers' money should continue to be poured into these failing SOEs.
Tito is raising a very valid point, a point that the president dodged in his speech. The president promised to spend all sorts of things, free accommodation, more of this, more of that, when in fact SARS is collecting less and less money. And the question is, if SARS is collecting less money, shouldn't we be spending the little that we collect prudently? And the answer to that is that we are not spending it prudently. Instead, we are throwing it into bottomless pits, which is what these SOEs are. So for COSATU to say this really shows an uncomfortable level of ignorance.
You've written a piece recently where you speak about the president possibly being, and I quote, a lame duck president. Why would you go as far as that he's not even halfway through his first term in office?
When you're elected president in a country like ours where there are contentious issues, you're not expected to take routine, safe decisions. Because there are sharp issues that we have to decide on, like Tito is now doing, right? So as the president, we have to lead and say, this is the path that we are taking. Instead, what he is doing is deferring these tough decisions to Tito. And now Tito is going to be attacked. And what has been happening in the past is that when Tito and Pravin Gordhan are attacked, this president remains quiet, right? And at some point, they will be attacked so much that they will capitulate, they will remain quiet. And when they are quiet, he will be left vulnerable because it doesn't look like he can stand up for himself. He doesn't want to speak on these contentious issues. So when it doesn't have allies, because no one will continue to stick out his neck when the president doesn't protect him or her. So they will step back, he will be left alone, and the question is, will he survive the onslaught from his enemies when he is without support? And I doubt that he will. So that means he might not even finish his first term. That is a lame duck president.
I don't think he'll be very happy with you this morning, but let's leave it there. Professor Busisiwe Mkhwebane, he is with the University of Johannesburg. On to this, there's a division of the South African National Defence Force that's helping